Then we reach the fourth film, and sadly, with major films coming out by Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, John Williams was just too busy to focus on the Harry Potter franchise anymore. And so they switched to Patrick Doyle. So, this film as a whole astounded me with its ability to make possibly the most exciting book so depressingly dull and sometimes confusing with its strange cuts, destruction of character,
Harry, you put your name in a Goblet of Fire.
weird pacing, lack of establishing scenes, and so on. But anyway, right from the Warner Brothers logo, the music is immediately different. We start getting just the slightest hints towards what I call action ostinatos, probably the easiest and, unfortunately, the most overused way to add pace and momentum to a scene. We get it later too, though thankfully for this film it's just tiny hints. There is this leitmotif, sort of the main theme of the film, which represents Harry and also heroism. It's good and it's extremely prevalent in this film, but it only appears in this film. And this again makes the Goblet of Fire feel quite insular from all the other films. There's also plenty of other melody. But it's easily forgotten as soon as it's gone. We get flavours of the different areas of the wizarding world. Take these flavours, this Irish jig for their Quidditch team, the thumping war drums and shouting men cliche for the Bulgarians, and the floaty, fluttering music of the Beauxbaton girls. This is all fine, good even, if not a little cliched, but it's so different from the vibrant richness of colour, melody, depth and detail that Williams set up in the first film, and so it all just feels a little more bare, a little more empty, like it doesn't quite fit with the tone of the previous films. As I've said before, consistency is key, and this is inconsistent. For a closer example, notice the fanfare to the Dragon Stadium entrance. Compare this with the Quidditch fanfare in Philosopher's Stone. These later themes are a lot more bare, a lot less exciting, and so the scene feels more bare and hollow than it should. A prime example is the brass band music before the maze. It's a bit weird, a bit mediocre, and it's deeply unmagical. To me, it sets up a mood of boredom and disinterest, especially considering it's the final challenge of a great tournament. That's the effect that music can have on a film or a franchise. The wrong music at the wrong time can suddenly make a scene feel hollow or empty, like something's missing or wrong. Whereas the right music can enhance it and make any emotional impact land with extra strength. Then again, maybe that's the whole point of this scene, so that when Harry comes back, we get this awful moment where the band starts again with their trite, banal celebration, not realizing what has happened in the maze. The emotional climaxes in this film don't always land, because the music, for whatever reason, just doesn't carry the necessary emotional weight. Then again, this is just as much a matter of the film director as it is the composer. Don't get me wrong, the music is lovely, but just so different. And so we say goodbye to the old richness, the music that was almost bursting at the seams with magic. We say goodbye to the sheer personality of the first scores. With the fifth film, things get stirred up again. This time, Nicholas Hooper takes the helm. Again, it's a different, new style, and actually, I was deeply impressed. Right at the title shot, he's developing counterpoint texture. It's already colourful, rich, exciting. There's this great new dynamic texture in the music, more swell, more energy. Take for instance the sonorous depth when we first see the Ministry of Magic, a mixture of sonority and string ostinatos. or the energy in the train to Hogwarts. Again, theme with Ostinato and Swells. We get this witty theme for Professor Umbridge. These mystical chimes as the Room of Requirements first appears. Or this kooky music for Luna.
I think I'll just go have some pudding.
It has the wit, magic, and sense of adventure reminiscent of the first films, but it's also in a completely new, different, more modern style, and it works very well. Take the much-loved fireworks scene, a sort of Celtic jig with pulsing bass and a persistent drum beat. It's not got the textural complexity of the first films, but it's great fun and it works well. However, the score might have its shortcomings too. For starters, some of the emotionally crucial parts of the story just don't land as strongly as they should. The ending feels weak, corny, and a bit bare.
Something worth fighting for.
It's just a little empty. And again, the music lacks a sense of great melody. Take this scene. It's a decent new style. We hear the repeated sort of action snare drums, and this bare melody over the top with some ostinato strings. But there's almost no harmony there at all, and this tune is not particularly singable or memorable. I wouldn't classify this as great melody. It's just a basic tune that's forgotten as soon as we move on to the next piece, and I think it's this sort of detail which makes the big difference between the first films and the later ones. The sixth film is quite different, despite also being by Nicholas Hooper. Again, there's this bumpy lack of consistency in the music between films. Yes, I expect the tone to get darker, as it does in the books, but not to shift and lurch so suddenly from film to film. It begins on the edge of silence, followed by this mournful theme. Followed by those overdone action strings that we talked about earlier, with their pulsing, thumping bass like a war march, war drums to accompany, and ostinatos in the background. This, to me, sounds like it could come from any other Hollywood movie score. You wouldn't know that it came from the Harry Potter universe. And actually, this pretty much sets the tone for the rest of the film. There's also a constant upbeatness and use of non-stop comic tropes, which make the film start to feel like a light-hearted rom-com or something out of St. Trinian's.
It was, but I was told I had to get an outstanding in my OWL.
So you over there. That's Romilda Vane.
Again, many of the emotionally significant points fail to land. Just imagine if there had been a Snape leitmotif right the way through the series, and what they could have done with it here and from here onwards. But no, we get next to nothing. There's just a lack of musical gravitas when it's needed to enhance the scene. In general, to me, the music seems bare, like this bizarre scoring in their Quidditch match. And sometimes it's just cliché and banal. For all the tragic bits of the score, we get that descending bass line, which has been a classic trope from musical grief since Purcell used it back in 1680. So here, it just feels a bit like it's trying too hard. It hits all the right cliches at the right points, but it feels like it's just totally lost the flavour of Harry Potter. It's no longer a Harry Potter score, it's just a score which generally hits the right notes at the right time, but could be chopped out and placed into any other film just as well. It's like the whole score is a simple assortment of action strings, comic tropes, and occasional moments of tragic cliché. Another thing I find troubling, again, is the absence of real melody. You can listen through the whole credits sequence and notice how bare it seems, almost as if it's just been sketched out and hasn't been filled out properly. There are no lyrical, singable melodies, and this just seems to sap the lifeblood out of the score when you compare it to the first few films. I know the score needs to be darker for this darker film, but that doesn't mean it needs to be empty. In fact, this is one of the few cases where I think the video game excels, while the movie falls short. Listen to this wonderful theme from the Half-Blood Prince game. It's singable and feels as if it lives, breathes, and actually expresses something. That's good melody. This music is truly alive, vibrant, brings life to the table. The whole game soundtrack is quite something actually. So what a shame that the film falls short. I'll reiterate again, this is a very good score in many ways, but what's weird is that the score once again sounds isolated from any of the others, and so the series, at least musically, is so far from a coherent whole.